Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing How Proust Can Change Your Life by Alain de Botton. I have not read any Botton prior to this, and if the impression that he gives is accurate, that it's going to be breezy takes on important subjects with a little bit of your nationality thrown into the insights, I'm in for it. And I have not read any Proust before. I would like to in the future. But this is a personal development book that doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think that on its own might be a reason for you to give it a read. So let's talk about some of their insights or thoughts. A terrible musical production in a provincial theater, or a ball which people of taste find ridiculous, will either evoke memories or else be linked to an order of reveries and preoccupations, far more than some admirable performance at the opera, or an ultra-smart soirée at the Faubourg Saint-Germain. The names of northern railway stations in a timetable, where he would like to imagine himself stepping from the train on an autumn evening, when the trees are already bare and smelling strongly in the keen air, an insipid publication for people of taste, full of names he has not heard since childhood, may have far greater value for him than fine volumes of philosophy, and lead people of taste to say that for a man of talent he has very stupid tastes. So the idea is, what is it that might inspire somebody, or what is it that an artist may sample? And this is something that I pointed out to people before with Anthony Bourdain, for example. He was a great lover of Waffle House, as am I, there's confession. But he also dined at Michelin star restaurants. So the question is, why is someone who's dining at Michelin star restaurants also dining at Waffle House? Well, the idea is there are different things that inspire people, and there are different reasons why those inspirations are important. And so as dining at Waffle House is its own experience and features its own tastes, so too here what's alluded to, that Proust, rather than looking to volumes of philosophy, would simply look at a railway timetable, look at the stops, see the names of the villages where the train would stop, and use that as a jumping off point for his reverie. You shouldn't look down on the simplicity, the banality of a particular form of influence, and instead work backwards and ask yourself, well, what is it in what is it that that person finds valuable, instead of concluding so and so has very stupid tastes. To you, maybe, but it's because you're lacking the curiosity to dig a little further as to why that person finds it that way. And sometimes, to be fair, it can simply be an idle pleasure or a guilty pleasure, whatever it might be. Somebody likes playing Tetris when they want to relieve their mind from the work that they generally do. There doesn't necessarily have to be a deep reason for something, but it should not simply be concluded because that you don't like it or you don't get it, that it's stupid. Something else that's also interesting is the potentially sometimes superficiality of reasons we feel a certain way. Albertine has some comparably normal thoughts. She walks into the narrator's room one morning and experiences a rush of affection for him. She tells him how clever he is and swears that she would rather die than leave him. If we asked Albertine why she had suddenly felt this rush of affection, one imagines her pointing to her boyfriend's intellectual or spiritual qualities, and we would of course be inclined to believe her, for this is a dominant societal interpretation of the way affection is generated. However, Proust quietly lets us know that the real reason why Albertine feels so much love for her boyfriend is that he has had a very close shave this morning, and that she adores smooth skin. The implication is that his cleverness counts for little in her particular enthusiasm. If he refused to shave ever again, she might leave him tomorrow. Once again, what are the little things that we appreciate about people that we try to dismiss or downplay, and instead play out some other abstract reason? Oh, I like this person, or I love this person because of this and this and this. That sounds very nice. But it might also be, in this particular case, she really liked his close shave. Or that you really like the way that someone's hair falls around her face. It is okay to share such admiration and to say that that triggers things, that we have a defensiveness against superficiality, as if to say that that plays no role whatsoever, when the reality is that so often it's a trigger and an entree into other things. If we're not attracted to somebody, we're not going to, at least as men, because of how we're wired, if we're not attracted to somebody, we're not going to reach out and speak to them. This is male or female, whether in platonic friendships or romantic relationships. There has to be some kind of spur into that. It isn't because, oh, wow, that person looks like he or she has a great intellect. I'm so attracted. It would be nice. That would be the way that people would like to guilt you into thinking about things. But the reality is, it's okay to admit that there are superficial spurs into either how we first met somebody or how we continue to care about them, love them, etc. And that's much more honest, and that's more realistic, and it opens the doors to other ways of thinking about things because it doesn't make you a slave to what other people think. And I think that's an important lesson as well. Speaking of what other people think, there is no man, however wise, who has not at some period of his youth, said things, or even lived in a way which was so unpleasant to him in later life that he would gladly, if he could, expunge it from his memory. But he shouldn't regret this entirely, because he cannot be certain that he has indeed become a wise man, so far as any of us can be wise, unless he has passed through all the fatuous or unwholesome incarnations by which that ultimate stage must be reached. I know there are young people whose teachers have instilled in them a nobility of mind and moral refinement from the very beginning of their school days. They perhaps have nothing to retract when they look back upon their lives. They can, if they choose, publish a signed account of everything they have ever said or done, but they are poor creatures, feeble descendants of doctrinaires, and their wisdom is negative and sterile. We cannot be taught wisdom. We have to discover it for ourselves, by a journey which no one can undertake for us, an effort which no one can spare us. Why can't they? Why is this painful journey so indispensable to the acquisition of true wisdom? Elster, which is one of the characters in a Proust story which de Botton is quoting from, Elster does not specify, though it may be enough that he has defined a relationship between the degree of pain a person experiences and the profundity of thought he or she may have as a result. It is as if the mind were a squeamish organ that refused to entertain difficult truths unless encouraged to do so by difficult events. Happiness is good for the body, Proust tells us, but it is grief which develops the strengths of the mind. These griefs put us through a form of mental gymnastics which we would have avoided in happier times. Indeed, if a genuine priority is the development of our mental capacities, the implication that is we would be better off being unhappy than content, better off pursuing tormented love affairs than reading Plato or Spinoza. And so there's a lot to look at there, but I'm going to limit it to two main ideas. Going back to this quote, we cannot be taught wisdom. We have to discover it for ourselves by a journey which no one can undertake for us, an effort which no one can spare us. And so this idea, I wish I had known then. So many of us, as we go through our life journey, and we reflect back to young people. I try to do that all the time. I've done that. I spent decades as a teacher. I still teach in different formats in my life to this day. It's something that I love to do. I feel I've been given a gift to do that, and I want to share that. We're always trying to convey lessons. When I was your age, I did this. I recommend that you do this. Or I wish I had known this. Part of what we fail to realize sometimes is the reason that we're in a position to convey that wisdom downstream is because we went on that difficult journey. So if we were to truly regret it, and regret in the sense of, I wish that had never happened, then I would not have that wisdom to convey. This isn't to say that you should do stupid things or you should go through difficulties so that you can have wisdom, so that you can pass that on. The point is that the journey sometimes is the point. The idea isn't, I should never make any mistakes in my life. This is different, obviously, from immorality, sinfulness. These are things that we're prey to and we should regret in general. But the point is to not look back at my life and try to make it this perfect clean slate in which I've never made any mistakes. Not only is this unrealistic, but it doesn't take into account the fact that the lessons that life offers us is sometimes gained through difficulty. And that's the second part of the point that I want to make, and is a beautiful quote by de Botton. Happiness is good for the body, Proust tells us, but it is grief which develops the strengths of the mind. Where are the hardest and where are the key lessons in our life? And you look back and say, these are the important rules that I live my life by. Very rarely have they been generated from a period of intense happiness, if such things exist. The idea has normally gone through some kind of suffering, some kind of difficulty, and that's where these great lessons come from. And once again, it doesn't mean that I go through life seeking difficulty, seeking misery in order to gain, quote unquote, gain great wisdom. But we should be excited about, in a certain sense, is that when we go through great difficulty, In our lives, one of the consolations we can take, other than, say, offering up our sufferings to God, is the idea of knowing that wisdom will come out of this. That apart from what I'm going through in a purely natural order, there will be wisdom, sometimes of the supernatural order, that will come to us. And that should be something to be celebrated, to be excited about, and that should help reframe some of those challenges. We feel something and reach out for the nearest phrase or hum with which to communicate, but which fails to do justice to what has induced us to do so. We hear Beethoven's Ninth and hum, bum, bum, bum. We see the pyramids at Giza and go, that's nice. These sounds are asked to account for an experience, but their poverty prevents either ourselves or our interlocutors from really understanding what we have lived through. We stay on the outside of our impressions, as if staring at them through a frosted window, superficially related to them, yet estranged from whatever has eluded casual definition. And I think that's something we can all fall into. I'm certainly guilty of that. Happy to be the first person to raise my hand. I try to go deeper, I do, but sometimes I can fall into superficial recapitulations. What do you think of such and such? Or when you visited here, what did you think about? And I think that's what de Botton has tried to point out, that if we can avoid it, the world is screaming for simplicity. The world is screaming for a 15-minute summary of a book on Blinkist. This is something I despise. This is a conversation for a separate time. The world is dying for an author who has written a 300, 400, 500-page book to come onto radio and summarize it for them in 2 minutes. So what's the quick summary of your book that you wrote that took you years and is 400 pages? Please tell us the quick version of it. What is the rush? What is the need to simplify everything? A lot of life is complicated. A lot of life requires more than a few simple sentences. And so when someone asks you about the pyramids of Giza, potentially the worst possible answer you could give is that's nice. And I'm not saying that people who do, this will be in my mind when I go to visit the pyramids later this year, that hopefully I don't fall into this trap, but I very well could, just like any other human can fall into any other trap any other time. But the idea of looking at these events, what is it that this music stirs within you? What is it that this book brings out in you? What is it that this conversation with a friend, this difficult exchange with a loved one brought out in you? And be okay with allowing complication to layer the experience rather than saying, I felt this, end of story. We stay on the outside of our impressions as if staring at them through a frosted window. And this goes back to some themes that we've talked about in different videos on this channel. Are we going to travel in order to collect experiences and then put them in a photo album and then recount them to ourselves and to others? Or are we willing to allow ourselves to be transformed in fundamental ways by the people and the things that we experience for the first time along the way? Those are the challenges that are in front of all of us. And there's no correct answer. But I think that challenge is certainly there, and it's something that we should think about and consider. This is a longer passage in which it relates to Proust meeting with different individuals of the upper class. Such disastrous encounters with aristocrats might encourage us to give up on our search for so-called eminent figures, who only turn out to be vulgar drones when we meet them. The snobbish longing to associate with those of superior rank should, it seems, be abandoned in favor of a gracious accommodation to our lot. This is an interesting idea. The idea of meeting your heroes. Should you meet your heroes? I have always been an advocate for that. And that is to say, I have met many. I've been very privileged, I would say, to meet many of the heroes that I've had in this life. And the reason I encourage it is precisely because you will be disappointed, because you have held these people to an impossibly high standard. That is in fact, the entire idea of a hero. Here is this person is placed up high. But it's important to remember in the hierarchy of the world, and this is something I tell people all the time who complain about not having enough time to do something, I'll say there are people who are doing many things. Elon Musk has the same 24 hours that I do, the same 24 hours that you do. We are in charge of what we do with our lives, and so as much as anyone else is. And so the question of meeting your heroes, the reason I encourage people to see them is because I want them to see those people's flaws. Not because I want them to be torn down, not because I want them to not be considered heroes anymore, but because it's important to contextualize heroism within the context of fallen man and original sin. We are all flawed, fallen human beings. And the sooner that we smash any kind of illusion that things are special, that people are special, and that they're above reproach, the more realistic and balanced our ideas will be about the world and about our fellow man. So it's important to meet our heroes, if only to remember that they are human, and to not set unrealistic expectations and not set up, in a sense, idols to these other people in our mind. It's not helpful to anybody. So this is part of a passage in which de Botton contrasts Marcel, who is a sort of sickly, weak character, with his brother Robert, who was incredibly energetic. So here's some context. Whereas Marcel could be killed by a draft, Robert was indestructible. When he was 19, he was riding a tandem bicycle in Rueil, a village on the Seine a few miles north of Paris. At a busy junction, he fell from his tandem and slipped under the wheels of an approaching 5-ton coal wagon. The wagon rolled over him. He was rushed to the hospital. His mother hurried from Paris in panic, but her son made a rapid and remarkable recovery, suffering none of the permanent damage the doctors had feared. When the First World War broke out, the Ox, now a grown-up surgeon, was posted to a field hospital at Étain, near Verdun, where he lived in a tent and worked in exhausting and unsanitary conditions. One day, a shell landed on the hospital, and shrapnel scattered around the table where Robert was operating on a German soldier. Though hurt himself, Dr. Proust single-handedly moved his patient to a nearby dormitory and continued the operation on a stretcher. A few years later, he suffered a grave car accident when his driver fell asleep and the vehicle collided with an ambulance. Robert was thrown against a wooden partition and fractured his skull, but almost before his family had had time to be informed and grow alarmed, he was back on the road to recovery and active life. So who would one wish to be, Robert or Marcel? The advantages of being the former can be briefly summed up: immense physical energy, aptitude for tennis and canoeing, surgical skill, financial success, father of a beautiful daughter, Susie. And Marcel? No physical energy, couldn't play tennis or canoe, made no money, had no children, enjoyed no respect until late in life, then felt too sick to derive any pleasure from it. So that idea of what does success look like externally, we only know about Robert Proust because he's the brother of Marcel. And we didn't know about Marcel because of all of his successes. In fact, he had many failures and setbacks. Think of another example would be Van Gogh. All these failures and setbacks, and yet he's known around the world. So don't underestimate sometimes that people have advantages in life because of gifts that were given them by God, but gifts that cannot be replicated. There are things that you can learn. For example, having done it myself, having mentored leaders and managers within companies that I've owned, I believe leadership and management can be taught. You just have to have a willing teacher and a willing disciple. But there are things that cannot be taught. And what is alluded to here, immense physical energy. You cannot teach immense physical energy. You cannot exercise into immense physical energy. There are limits to what you can do with the chemistry of your body and exercising and eating right to get you to, let's say, a good level of energy. But there are people, and I know these people, who don't need as much sleep, who have a nuclear power plant or several nuclear power plants in their body and in their brain, allowing them to work on many tasks at once and accomplishing them with relentless efficiency. These are not things that these people have learned along the way. They are just gifts that they've been given by God, and they're utilizing them to the best of their ability. As far as I can tell, Robert Proust really did use that. But it's important for us to remember when we look in context and we quote-unquote compare ourselves to other people, which is always very dangerous to do. Ask yourself how many of these things are things that I could work on myself that can be signals for me. Oh, that's something I could improve in, and that's something that I could actually work on, as opposed to natural gifts that have nothing to do with that. Having immense physical energy, that's not something that can be replicated. That's a gift that someone has. It's like being tall. You can't replicate that. It's just something you're born with or you're not. And it's okay. And I think that's the idea, that it's okay to have those distances. God loves variety. I always think of giraffes when I think about that idea, that there is so much variety, not only within the natural world, but even between us as humans, that that's something that should be celebrated and enjoyed and embraced, not used as a template for competitiveness within each other, and again, unhealthy comparisons of others, and seeking to replicate everything that they have, and just realize there are some things about people that are not replicable, and that's a wonderful thing. Rejoice in that. Last idea: if you're unfamiliar with Proust, part of his reputation derives from the fact that he very famously bit into a madeleine, which is a French pastry, cookie, however you want to look at it. It's neither pastry nor cookie, but we don't really have necessarily an analog for it in American life. You could maybe say a soft brownie that's not chocolate. In any case, he bites into this, and then a bunch of memories flood into his brain from his childhood. If the incident with the Madeleine cheers the narrator, it is because it helps him realize that it isn't his life that has been mediocre so much as the image of it he possessed in memory. So what this did, it didn't create a memory. It shone a light onto a memory that made him realize it was much more beautiful and wonderful than he had allowed himself to remember. And now we're having a sort of meta commentary, memory about memory. You have to remember that we know from research that every time I go back to a memory, the brain modifies it slightly. It's as if when a record needle goes onto a record, that over time that continues to erode that disc. I don't know if young people will necessarily know what a record player is, but I'll leave you to look on the internet for what that is. But are we allowing ourselves to trivialize our memories, or are we really looking back at the life that we've lived? Very famously, Flannery O'Connor said that anyone who has survived childhood has enough material to write about for a lifetime. I think so often we don't allow ourselves to plumb those memories and to look at them with fresh eyes, and to look at them for the beauty and reality that is there for us. Now, I will be the first one to say I had a very blessed and privileged childhood, so I may not be plumbing the same memories that someone who went through much more difficulty. Maybe they were orphaned, maybe they grew up in poverty. Those are things that can still offer, even though I haven't experienced that. I know through experiencing hardship, there's still a possibility to plumb useful and important memories from difficulty. And I think Proust's work in general, and this book in particular about Proust, helps us to think through the importance of memory in a neutral way, to allow us to not bring any baggage to thinking about those memories. I'm just going to examine these memories and allow them to live fresh, and allow myself to derive some insights into them. That, in a certain sense, one of the ways that we can travel so often is memories of our memories. And there's a couple people that I've traveled to New Zealand with twice now, both for a month at a time. And every now and then a memory, or more than every now and then, quite often a memory of a particular quote or an idea will come to mind, and I'll send a message to both of them, and we'll just have a laugh about it. That memory is so vivid. That trip that we took and all the memories that we made together, there are moments that they only get richer over time. That the memory of the memory, the thought of the memory, allows us to re-enter something in a way that is almost, I would argue, is richer than the original memory. The original memory was being experienced by you for the first time, and there's a freshness there that can't be taken from you. But the memory of the memory that shared with others who were there, over and over, we've experienced it all when we tell stories about family, about friends at gatherings, and we all laugh about it, and we tell the same stories over and over because it's such a helpful, useful memory. Not helpful, useful memory, a helpful, useful vector we use to talk about these memories that are so important to us. Anyway, How Proust Can Change Your Life, Alain de Botton. There's a link in the description below. If you liked what you heard today, hit like, subscribe, share this with other people, particularly those who potentially want a different look at personal development. I think this book will deliver that. One of the ways that you can support the channel is by buying a copy of the book, either in this print form or digitally. Description links are below. You can also look at my Amazon wish list if you want to sponsor future books in the series. If it's on my Amazon wish list, it's something I want to cover already. Obviously, it's subdivided into books on Palestine and general books. I have another channel, Palestine Bookshelf, if you want to check out works about Palestine. Know that when you go to the Amazon wish list, which channel you're picking for based on the book. If it's on my wish list, it's something I want to read, so in a way you can sponsor a video. If you want to thank me for this video in particular, there's PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee. There are links for that below. But if you'd like to support the work on an ongoing basis, I have Patreon and YouTube membership. There you'll get early releases of videos like this one. You'll have a chance to talk to me behind the scenes and learn more about the process by which I select books, and talk to me about books that I am reading but I'm not necessarily reviewing on the channel for various reasons. Until next time, enjoy your reading.